This topic that I wish to share with you, this is actually Lex Crucis. It's a Latin for the law of the cross. It's a deep theological reflection on the cross of Christ. And I would like to relate this on how this cross of Christ can be salvific. How this cross of Christ can save. Why is the cross of Christ the way that God used to save mankind? And then, what is the relevance of this cross of Christ, especially now, in this secular age? Okay? So these are the questions that I hope to share with you. This law of the cross is actually a soteriological notion of Bernard Lonergan. He's a Canadian theologian. To tell you frankly, when I did this study,
I read the 25-volume work, and the main text that I use is actually this thick, over 1,000 pages. I am teaching this also in Don Bosco School of Theology, and in one to devote almost half of the semester to explain this soteriological concept. And so my difficulty now is how to compress all this for 1 hour. So please bear with me. So there are actually 70 slides here. I'll try my best to explain this to you in the best way I can so that you can understand them also in the fast way. Okay. Let's just move ahead. The starting point before we begin to understand this law of the cross is this what we call the salvation history. Okay? The plan of God in the salvation history. So there are actually three things in the project of God. How His plan of salvation has been plotted out for all of us. Okay. How was this salvation plotted out in history? It happened in three ways. First, we know this already, we have creation. Okay? And then second, okay, creation led to actually this what we call the fall. And then realizing the difficulties of the fall, it actually led into the project of God to save man, which is what we call restoration. So these are actually the three steps. Okay? So out of His great love and benevolence, because God, who is all-loving, abundance in love, wanted to share that love, and so He shared His love by doing this act of creation. And we know that the act of creation, the crown of creation is actually man. Okay? And for us to understand, although that man, as the crown of creation, he has actually given a specific gift to man. He is regarded as the crown of creation for many ways. Number one, okay, he is created in the image and likeness of God. Okay. What do you mean by man being created in the image and likeness of God? Okay. Many are saying because man was given intelligence, unlike in all other creatures, they were not given that rationality. Another is that man was given freedom, okay, and the will. The animals, okay, they don't have that much freedom or will as compared to man. But for me, when we speak of the image and likeness of God, it's about God who is actually love. Okay. When we speak about God, when we speak about the image and likeness of God, man as the image and likeness of God, what is it that how is it that man is like God? So what is the image of God that He is, of which man gets his image and likeness? Okay. the answer is actually found in the Gospels, especially in the first letter of John, when we said that God is actually love. Okay? Because God is love, therefore our image and likeness of God is to become beings of love. Okay? But before we become beings of love, it is important that God would give us freedom. It is important that God would give us freedom. And this is actually the crux, no? When God has given freedom to man, because God knows that if God will give freedom to man, man has the choice whether to accept God or not to accept God, whether to love God or to reject God. Okay, and so a lot of people are asking, if God knew that man will lead into his doom because of his free choice, then why did God give man freedom? The answer is this: because the image of God is love. And because the image of God is love, therefore, in His image, man must love. But you cannot love without freedom. It is difficult to love, or love is not love, if there's no freedom. Okay? So this is actually the premise why God has to give us freedom, even with that risk of rejecting God. Because love cannot be love unless it is free. I remember a couple, no? Actually, it's actually the husband coming to me, crying because his wife decided to leave him. Okay. When I learned about the story is that the man was actually very possessive of the wife. The man was very controlling. Okay? Initially, the wife loved the man. But the problem is that this man has become so controlling that he does not even want his wife to get out from the house. Because he's a very jealous man. Masyadong seloso, very possessive. Ayaw paalisin sa bahay. And so, yung wife, okay na? Yung wife nasasakal. Okay. So, yung wife nasasakal, kaya I said he's not happy. He doesn't feel the love because even though this man would tell that he loves his wife, he could not, the wife cannot believe it because of the restriction that his wife is actually experiencing. Okay? So, love cannot be love unless it is done in freedom. Okay? So this is the reason why there should be freedom. Can we move forward? Okay. Okay. So, can you go back to the last slide? Okay. So, this is actually the plot of God's salvation in history. Okay. I would like to begin with creation. Okay. In creation, in the priestly account, you know that in creation there are actually two accounts. First, we have the priestly account, which is in Genesis chapter 1 until verse 2 of chapter 2. And you will get to, this is the most familiar account of the creation because we know that in this particular account, God has created the world into 6 days. On the 7th day, He rested. Okay. So what does this tell us? It tells us that we speak of creation as actually a process. Okay? Sorry. I think Okay. No, I have it actually. Ah, pasensya na ha. Technical problem. Okay. Okay. In creation, it speaks of the process of which God did. No, it could have happened that God has, with the one flick of the finger, everything has been created. But the creation, the process of creation in the priestly account, it illustrates there the series, no, the step by step that Christ did, no, because here we are, the Lord is actually speaking of the process of creation. So what are we trying to say here? Creation actually results into movements. Results into movement. So when God actually created something, history started. As soon as God said, "Let there be," okay, history started, evolution started. And if you take note of this, history and evolution, these are actually expressions of movement. Okay. Creation starts the movement. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip all of this because there is no... yeah, we have it already. Can you... Gumagana ba? Okay. 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 So, we talk about creation. In a nutshell, it's like this. Okay. When God created us, a lot of series of movements happened. Okay. One, as soon as creation happened, history started, because remember that God is actually operating in eternity. When God started creation, that creation started the time. And so history already began. And then also, when creating something, that creature or whatever that He has created, it started to move. And so there is that movement. And so there are actually two movements that we see here in creation. We have history and then movement, the evolution. Okay. Now, but then there's actually a third movement that is at play here, especially when God created man. As I have mentioned a while ago, with man as the crown of all creatures, man has given this privilege of freedom. Now, this interplay of history and evolution, there's a third movement at play in the world, and that is what we call freedom. And the difficult thing here is that, okay, there is the history, there is the evolution, and now the freedom sometimes would take over history. Freedom would even take dominance over evolution. And so the freedom is actually that it's what is causing the decline or the downfall in the world. Okay. So I am presenting here creation, and then the risk of freedom leads man to decline, especially during the point of his fall. Okay na? Okay, sige. It's okay. Okay. I'm sorry, medyo na-disorient ako because I'm dependent on my slides. This is actually the basis of my presentation. Okay. Allow me to backtrack. Okay. Okay. So, here we have two movements of creation. As soon as God has created, two movements occur. We have history and we have evolution. Okay. Now, one thing that is actually given, why is it necessary? Okay. No, let's skip this. I'm sorry. Okay. So, three movements are at play: history, evolution, and freedom. With man as the crown of creation, it is this factor of freedom that leads man to its decline. Okay? When we go to the second account of creation, this is the second account. This is in Genesis chapter 2. Okay? When God created man, okay, it is very immediate in His creation. This is what we call the tzedakah. Okay. This tzedakah in Hebrew has two meanings. The first one is what we call the righteousness. The second was it's the intimacy or closeness. Because the most common understanding of tzedakah is righteousness. Let's not use that word because that's not I'm going to refer to. I'm going to refer to the intimacy or the closeness that was actually very immediate when God created man. Okay. What is this intimacy or closeness? When God created man, man is actually close to all the other creatures, to all its connections. So man is connected to God. Man is close to Eve. No? He's the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bones. He is close to the animals. He is close to the nature and so on. So that is actually very immediate. Okay? I'm introducing this concept because later, something will happen during the fall, especially when man asserted his freedom. Okay. Now, it's very important that in this particular account of Genesis, there is that tree. There are actually two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge between good and evil. And Jesus said they can eat all the trees of the world. They have all trees in the world. No, they can eat all the fruits, except for this tree. Okay, except for this tree. Now, questions would arise: why would God still create this tree if He knows that this tree will be the cause of the downfall of man? Is He not actually testing or tricking man? So these are theological questions that were raised, especially in this book of Genesis. Now, the answer is this. God created the tree because that tree represents two things. The first thing is this. The tree belongs to God. They could not touch the tree because that tree belongs to God. It's divine's property. Okay? So when God said, you shall not even touch it, it's because that tree belongs to me. Okay? So that's one interpretation. Second interpretation has something to do with freedom. Okay? For a person to be free, a person must have possibilities. Okay? If a person has only one option, then I would say that is not freedom. True freedom should have possibilities, unlimited possibilities. And so this tree represents that possibilities. Okay? And so what happened? Temptation happened. So here comes now the snake trying to tempt Adam and Eve. Okay? In the temptation, okay, when the woman saw the fruit of the tree, it was good for food, pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. If you look for this, for the details of this, good for food actually refers to pleasure. Okay, material ones. Pleasing to the eye refers to no, good for food is something of the flesh. Pleasing to the eye is something for popularity. And then gaining wisdom is something for power. And this will actually connect with the temptation of Jesus in the Gospels later on. Okay? Now, we go back. They can eat all the trees of the world. They have unlimited possibilities, except for the one tree in the center from which they must not eat. They must not eat because it belongs to the divine. So the Lord is telling them, you should not touch it, because if you touch it, you will die. But what happened? Man did not listen. Okay? What God wants is for man to trust God. But man did not trust God. And so that tzedakah was actually destroyed as a consequence of sin. And what is the manifestation of this? The manifestation of this is that man was actually isolated. The point of sin, it's cutting us off from our relationships, from our tzedakah, from our connections. So, because of sin, it has cut us off from God. We did not trust Him. We did not trust the animals. Before, in the garden, people, they don't even eat animals. They eat fruit-bearing trees. Only after the fall that animals started to become wild. Okay? After the fall, man has become distrusting of his fellow man. No? He's even blaming Eve. Okay? So, all his relationships are cut off. So, there is this isolation. Okay? So, but despite all this, God's determination is there in the salvation of man and the world. Okay? And so if you look at the Bible from beginning to end, it started with creation, it ended with new creation. Okay, why? Because that new creation is actually His way, His process of trying to win back the thing that man has actually destroyed because of sin. Okay. I'm sorry I'm hurrying up. Okay. So, now you will see that there are actually four movements here. The movement of history, because the world moves, our time moves in itself. Evolution, everything that is actually here created on earth is in its movement. And then the freedom of man. What actually moves the world is basically the actions, the behavior of the human being, and it's actually changing the face of the earth as it moves in history. But then there's actually a fourth movement at work, and this is God's salvation. Okay? To act out, to resolve the problem of sin that was actually begun by man. Now, let's look at sin. When we look at the concept of sin, especially in our catechetical understanding, okay, sin is regarded as hamartia, missing the mark, personal rupture, relationship with God, personal guilt, weakness, disobedience to God's will. We already know that. Okay? But then there's something more with sin rather than a personal guilt. Sin is not just simply about cutting your relationship with God. Sin is actually something graver, something more serious than that. Why? We look at sin today, it's difficult to get over sin. Why? You find yourself, no, okay, I want to change, but then you find yourself repeating the sin again and again. Because sin can be likened into an addiction. Because sin can also be regarded as a contagious disease. Like for example, a child who's so innocent but is actually living in an environment where the entire family are liars. Okay? That child living in that environment where everybody are liars will end up becoming a liar because of the sin operating in his environment. So it's contagious. Sin can be contagious. So here I'm trying to express that sin is not just simply disobeying God's will. That sin is not just simply a personal rupture or break in God's relationship. Sin has something more. Okay? Sin is actually leading us to be rooted in our addiction. Sin can be contagious. Sin can even have historical consequences. Okay? People would say, sorry, tao lang, nagkamali ako. But then we don't realize that that particular sin that we did has consequences. And even consequences that will run throughout history. Some of the sins that we are experiencing now in this present time are actually a product of sins of our fathers, of our grandfathers, of the previous generation. Because that is one characteristic of sin. Okay? But that's just one person. What if we are talking about 1 million people committing sin? So the consequences that is actually happening throughout history, now this becomes complicated and what do you call this? They become a structure. It becomes a life on its own. So sin creates a kind of a network or structure. I'm trying to explain here about the seriousness of sin. Yes, God created us good. Every time that God, at the end of the day, after His creation, He would step back and He would say, it is good. He created us good. He gave us freedom. He made us the crown of creation. But because of that sin, even that goodness, that gift that God has given us, it's not even canceling out. It's even much graver, such that man is not only canceled out of the gift, man is continuously declining, degrading. Okay? So, we cannot just simply say, sorry, tao lamang. I'm just trying to tell here, everyone, that sin is something very serious. Okay? And that's the reason why the more the structure of sin expands, the deeper man goes and drowns into the pit of his doom. And so, by man alone, he cannot save himself. Okay? Because of the seriousness of sin. Now, it's not just about being caught in the web of sin, of corruption, of evil and decline. What is characteristic also of this present time is that in this present time, God is on mute. We are actually living in a world of a secular age wherein God is actually put aside. Imagine a world already, especially people who do not have sense of sin. Okay? Now, we speak of lies, but then they are even being defended. Okay? What is false becomes true. What is true becomes false, becomes lie. So, that's the characteristic of our modern world today. And then another characteristic is that this world is moving towards that direction wherein they want to shut up God. They want to hide God. They want to remove God from the public sphere. And this is not only happening in the Western countries, it's already creeping even in our country. Okay, especially that bill, if you remember, that bill trying to forbid all the religious signs in public places. This is actually that picture of secularism. They're trying to put God on mute. When I went to Germany, I studied German course there, I saw this. Really, it's there. Okay? What does it mean? Religion-free zone. It means Religion should not be exercised here. Okay? You're entering a religion-free zone. That is what it means. That's in Germany. Okay? I have a priest friend who entered France. Okay? And on the airport, he was stopped by a policeman, a French policeman, because my priest friend was wearing the cross. And then the police said, "Please take that off." And the priest said, "Why? I'm not doing anything wrong." Okay? The police said, "Because by wearing that, you are imposing your faith on me." Imagine the absurdity that is going on in the world. They are trying to put away religion in the public sphere. Okay? So now, God is on mute, and then sin, the sense of sin is actually getting lost in the society because people do not regard sin as something serious. So, imagine, what kind of world do we live now? No? I'm not going to discuss about this secularity anymore. I'm going to discuss about this. The more the structure of sin expands in a more secular environment, the deeper man goes and drowns into the pit of his doom. So, how is salvation felt? How can we say that we are saved? Have you ever asked by our Protestant brothers, "Are you saved?" Were you asked already, "Are you saved?" Okay, because for them, they say that just confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. That is their confession. But how can we claim Christ's salvation with all this reality? The problem with the personal confession of the Protestant, just confess in your heart that Jesus is Lord and you are saved. Okay, I am saved. But I see in the world all this corruption, all this evil, this secularity. I am saved, but then I see other people drowning. Is that the plan of salvation that God wanted? Is that the meaning of salvation? Is salvation reduced only in the spiritual? When God died on the cross, does He mean that He wanted to save this world also? Or only our souls? These are actually questions, no? For us Catholics, does the work of God's salvation remain only in the sacramental order? When we are baptized? When we go to confession? So, these are questions. Here I would like to express that the salvation of God is not only spiritual. It is the intention of God to save even this world. He wanted this world to be transformed. Okay? And so Lonergan expands this Christian understanding of salvation through this what we call the law of the cross. Now the question is, why the cross? Why the cross? God could have saved the world by a flick of a finger. Why does He have to enter into human form? Suffer in the cross. There are many ways by which God can save the world, but why the cross? Okay, first let's understand this cross. Okay? When asked about what the cross is for Catholics, for Christians, these are the contemporary familiar understanding or meaning of the cross. Number one, okay, it's a symbol of Jesus and all He stands for. Okay, the cross symbolizes for them salvation, forgiveness, mercy, etc. You ask other people, what do you mean by the cross? Okay, for me it's God's mercy. What do you mean by the cross? The cross is actually a symbol of power over demons. I had that experience. I was preaching a retreat to a group of students. Suddenly one student threw herself dun sa gitna and started convulsing. Okay? the immediate reaction is to pin down that student, and I took the cross and I put the cross on the chest, and the girl was relaxed. So even the exorcist used the cross because the cross has become a symbol of power over demons. Okay? The cross is a message of love. So these are contemporary understanding of the cross, and this is how we are so familiar with the cross. Okay? Not that there's nothing wrong with this, but because we are too familiar with the cross, we have already forgotten the shock and the scandal of crucifixion. We look at the cross with in awe and beauty. We look at the cross as something beautiful. But during that time of Jesus, during the Jewish time, the cross is not something beautiful. The cross is something horrifying, something terrifying. It's a scandal to be crucified. In the Greco-Roman world, it has the character of shock, horror, and terror. Especially the Romans, they use the cross to intimidate, to instill fear, actually, to the people that they are dominating. For the Jewish world, it's a message of scandal. To be crucified on the cross is actually a curse, which we shall see later on. Okay? I'm dwelling so much here on the cross because we have been desensitized already, because we see the cross, not that I'm saying that this is wrong, but we see the cross as already transformed. We have already forgotten the original understanding of the cross. Okay? And it's something of a shock and a scandal. There are 4 aspects of Roman crucifixion in the first century. I would like to present the 4 aspects of crucifixion. The cruelty of the cross, the shame of the cross, that in the crucifixion it's actually a mass penalty, and then the curse of the cross. I will try to go through this briefly. Okay, first we look into the cruelty of the crucifixion. To be crucified is to experience of the most wretched death. And this was actually noted by historians. These are external evidences saying that the cross is actually a punishment. It's the worst way to die, which we shall see later on. Okay? This is the painting of Matthias Grunewald. It is in Eisenheim in Germany. Okay? It's Renaissance period. You know, in Renaissance period, when they depict the cross, it's usually divine. It's usually beautiful. It's usually, sometimes you don't even see the wounds, no? But this particular painter, this is the first most gruesome depiction of the cross. This particular painting. Okay? I'm very, not that I'm happy, but it's good that during the, who is that? That director, Passion of the Christ? Mel Gibson, no? It's good that Mel Gibson has portrayed the Passion of the Christ in the most violent way, for us to be reminded on how Christ really suffered. Because we look at the cross now, we are so desensitized already. Okay? And then, why there's cruelty in the crucifixion? Okay. Normally, those people who are being crucified are scourged. I'm not pertaining here of what is said in the Gospels, no? Actually, it ties up what is said in the Gospel and what the historians are telling. It ties up very well. So this is not romanticized by the evangelists. This is actually the very method by which the people are being crucified. Okay? And the flogging is really already horrifying. Okay? And Mel Gibson has portrayed that well in that movie, Passion of the Christ. Okay? Another aspect of the cruelty of the crucifixion is the carrying of the cross. Okay? This is actually a public display of shame. Another aspect, in the carrying of the cross, normally, at the site of the crucifixion, they would normally place the person where there are actually a lot of people. That's why the place of skull is not really accidental. It is actually a place wherein people will get to see those who will be crucified. Okay? And then we go into the very aspect of crucifixion itself. There are many ways by which a person is actually crucified. It can be suspension by nailing, tying, or impaling. Okay? And people actually die of asphyxiation. People die of crucifixion, not because of the nails, not because of the loss of blood, but because when you are hanging, your diaphragm is actually stretched, and you will die little by asphyxiation. What is that? Nauubusan ka ng hininga. Paunti-unti. So imagine why this crucifixion is very gruesome, because unti-unti, masyadong matagal. Matagal ang punishment. It's really the longest way and the most gruesome way to die. Okay? So that's the cruelty of the crucifixion. Okay, now let's look into the shame of the crucifixion. We already mentioned the first one during the carrying of the cross. It's shameful because the crucifixion is actually a punishment for the slaves. Okay? You know the difference between Peter and Paul. Okay? Both of them were executed. Okay? But Peter was executed by crucifixion, and Paul was executed by beheading. Why the difference? Because Paul is a Roman citizen, and the Jews were considered slaves. And so, to be crucified, it's actually a penalty, a punishment for the slaves. So those who are being crucified are actually slaves. So that's something shameful. Crucifixion is also a form of mockery. Okay? The very way that they are being crucified, that's already mockery. I want to read this. This is actually very scandalizing, no? This is from Seneca. He said, I see crosses there not just of one kind, but made in many different ways. Okay, let's pause there. Okay, we often think that cross is always like this, no? Vertical, horizontal. We always believe that the soldiers, no, are already, there are already series of crosses made, no? Naka-ready na sila. Okay, but no. These Roman soldiers do not have the time to prepare to design the cross for slaves, for punishment. They will just see one wood there, okay? And then, kung ano man na nakita nilang wood doon, yun ang gagamitin nila para pang-crucify. Wala nang design. Okay? You will see here the various ways by which people are crucified. Okay? Walang standard sa pagkukrucify. Bakit? Kasi it's the Roman soldiers who will do this. Bahala sila kung anong gusto nila, paano kanila i-crucify. Some are crucified this way, some this way, some this way, some by impaling. I'm sorry for saying this, even we are in the chapel. Some are even crucified by impaling them in their sexual organs. Okay? It depends on the Roman soldiers. Okay? There is no such thing as art of crucifying. So when they put your arms here, okay, that's where you are going to be crucified. Okay. Remember, Peter, you know that Peter was crucified upside down. There is a legend that says, no, there's the story saying, no, I don't want to be crucified just like Christ, so I requested that I be crucified upside down. There is that legend. That is not true. There is no historical account. Why? Because it's the Roman soldiers who will decide on how you are going to die. Okay? So, and even on how you are going to crucify. So these are the various ways. This is how Andrew was crucified. Okay? The normal mode of being crucified is this one. Okay? They say there are two ways by which they say Peter was crucified. It could be this one or this one. We don't know. Okay, but what we know is that Peter was crucified upside down. Who decides this? It's not Peter. It's the Roman soldiers. Okay. But how about Christ? How did we know that he was crucified that way? Because there are already even historical accounts that Jesus Christ, and this is verified, he was crucified that way. Okay? So, even the crucifixion is actually a form of mockery and even shameful. Okay. Another expression of the shame in the crucifixion is that victims are ordinarily naked, wherein the last act of humiliation is actually to rub off, okay, in the crucified man, his dignity, his last ounce of dignity. Okay? Actually, here, we have here Christ, no? There is that, ang tawag dito, balabal, no? But in reality, that's not how it is. He is totally naked. Of course, no, we will not put that in our chapel, Jesus, which is totally naked. But there is actually one cross who is actually faithful for this, no? This is found in Florence. Okay? And this is made by Michelangelo. And this is the most faithful depiction of Christ on how he was crucified. He is completely naked. Okay? Except for one thing, there's something wrong with this picture. Why? He's still clean, no? But because the Renaissance artists, they kapag lumikha sila ng obra maestra, talagang sinasadya nila yung mga detalye. So yung pagiging malinis ni Jesus is actually symbolic of his divinity. Okay? Even if you go to the work of Pietà, it's the same artist, si Michelangelo, the Pietà. What do you notice there? Jesus is also clean. Okay? Walang sugat. Why? Because that is his way of communicating the divinity of Christ. Okay, imagine this cross. He is completely naked. Okay, this is not seen here. It's not in the chapel. This is actually hidden. Thank you. This is actually hidden in the sacristy. Okay. Of course, they will not put this cross here in the chapel. Imagine doing a consecration. The cross is there hanging. No? So it's a distraction. Okay. Because there is it communicates that message of shame when you are naked. Okay, the shame on the cross. Okay, and then in the crucifixion, the crucifixion does not only belong to Christ. Okay, because we always believe that cross is only for Christ. No, this crucifixion is actually a punishment for many people already. So usually when they do crucifixion, it's a mass crucifixion. Okay? But in our Gospels, or the way history unfolded, Christ was crucified with two thieves. But normally, it's actually a crucifixion of many people. It so happened that during that time, there were only two thieves. Okay? So these are accounts of, historical accounts of the mass penalty. Another aspect of the crucifixion is that it's actually a curse, and this is in Deuteronomy. Okay? It's written, if a man has committed a crime punishable by death and he is put to death, you hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but shall bury him the same day. For a hanged man is accursed by God. This is actually controversial now. Because is Jesus Christ cursed by God? How can God curse His own Son? So how do we interpret this? We will get to this later. Okay? Because it is not Jesus Christ who is actually cursed. It is sin. Okay? Which we shall discuss later. Okay? Let's skip this. So what I'm trying to illustrate to you is actually the horrors of the cross. We have been desensitized already because we are so used to the meaning of the cross as love, the meaning of the cross as salvation, the meaning of the cross as mercy. We have forgotten the horrors of the cross. This is very important for us to understand why the cross of Christ saves. Okay? If we want to understand how this cross of Christ becomes a way of salvation, first we need to go back to the original understanding of crucifixion. And that is in a horrible way. Because that is how Christ went through the cross. Okay? So, this was the view of the cross before Christ and even during the crucifixion. But then later on, Saint Paul would have a different mind of the cross. He would say, "Far be it from me to boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ." So from that period of Christ's crucifixion to Saint Paul, what happened? There is now the changed understanding of the cross. Why? Because the message of the cross by the time of Saint Paul has been transformed. Okay? Nagbago na ang meaning pagdating kay Saint Paul. Okay? Pero dun muna tayo doon sa understanding ng cross as something horrifying. Okay. And so the question is, why is it necessary for the Son of God to die on the cross? I have asked this later on. He could have flicked his fingers. He could have just simply say, "Okay, the world is saved." Bakit kailangan pa dumaan sa krus? Ba't kailangan pa siyang ipanganak? Okay. The answer was already given several years ago because this question was also asked by a student of Saint Anselm. Okay? Same question was asked. Why is it necessary for the Son of God to die on the cross? And Saint Anselm said, "Oh, you have not considered the greatness of the weight of sin." The sin is so great. The consequences of sin is so great that it needs a match. What is that? Because sin is great, it needs a penalty that must match the greatness of the sin. And the greatest penalty that a man could ever experience is the cross. If the cross is the greatest punishment for man, this will match the greatness of sin. And for this reason, God had to come and join us into our situation of sin so that He could fix that problem from within. Okay? We look into the Bible and we see the many dysfunctions in the Bible from the Old Testament. Stupidity, hatred, hypocrisy, discrimination, wars, violence, a lot of violence in the Bible. Okay? Jesus took upon Himself all of these and paid the price. So, Jesus Christ, by dying on the cross, He took all the curse of sin. And when He was crucified on the cross, He was crucified with all this sin. That's why it's not actually Jesus Christ who was cursed. It's actually the sin which God took so that when He was crucified on the cross as a punishment, okay, so sin is also punished. Okay. You'll get to understand later why why God has to go through this. Okay, but allow me to present this further. Okay. Have you heard about the Columbine massacre? Okay. There is this two students in Massachusetts, in Boston, who went to the school. They were armed, okay, and they started shooting everyone. A lot of students died, and then at the end, those two students committed suicide. So what happened during this time? So during this time, of course, the students were traumatized. Okay, the school and the government had to do some intervention to treat the trauma of the students. And so the students were undergoing group therapy, okay, to address that problem. Okay. But it has been months already pero wala pa ring nangyayari. Okay, traumatized pa rin yung mga students. Of course, inadvertently, hindi naman talaga intention nung isang counselor, sinabihan niya isang student. Sabi nga rin, can you not move on and forgive? The students got angry. Okay? My sister, my brother got killed. And you tell me to move on? You tell me to forgive? Okay? So, we are saying here, forgiveness requires, yes, forgiveness. Jesus teaches forgiveness. We should forgive, of course. But forgiveness requires hard work. Forgiveness is not just simply saying, okay, I forgive you in words. Forgiveness is undergoing through a process even within you. Even, we know this, no? For people, in order to get to forgive someone, he even has to go through different stages before finally forgiving someone. Okay? Especially when we are dealing with pain. Okay? So, what I'm trying to say here is that forgiveness is actually hard work. And I'm saying this because God could have simply said the words of magic, okay, the world is saved. But He chose the way of the cross because that's hard work. For us, it's easy for us to get, para sa atin, gusto natin yung easy way. But Jesus did not choose the easy way. God did not choose the easy way. He chose the hard way. Because forgiving love is actually hard work. I wanted to share more about this, already this story, no? About the forgiveness of Cherry Pie Picache, who forgave the murderer of her mother. It wasn't also easy for her. It's hard work for her. Okay? So, what I'm trying to say is that when Jesus embraced His cross, He took up all the violence of sin and His divine mercy, into His divine mercy. It's a hard work of forgiving love. And there, from the cross, with sin crucified as well, He transformed sin and evil into good. And so, here you will see here that the transformation of the cross from something horrifying to St. Paul's proclamation as something that we can boast of. So, Christ transformed the cross from something horrible into a message of love. This is the law of the cross. Ang haba ng aking sinabi, pero ito po yung tinutumbok ng law of the cross. Sinasabi, this is why the Son of God became man, suffered, died, and was raised again. Because divine wisdom has ordained, divine goodness has willed, not to do away with evils of the human race through power, but to convert those evils into a supreme good. What are we trying to say here? There are three possible solutions of God for the salvation of man. Okay? First, it's through power or violence, total annihilation. Okay? Ang daming problema sa mundo, ang daming corruption, ang daming kasalanan. Simple lang. Wipe out. Create again. But that does not answer the problem. Because if you still create again and you still give the same freedom to man, they will still fall into sin. So that's not the solution. Okay? Second solution, total forgiveness. Saying the word of forgiveness, okay, you're all saved, I forgive you. There's a problem here. What if the person is not repentant? How can you forgive someone who does not want forgiveness? That means God is disrespecting the freedom of man. Okay? Where is justice here if there is total forgiveness? So it's okay to sin again and again. Anyway, God will forgive me. Okay? That is not the solution of God. The solution of God is, number 3, transformation. The solution of God is not power or violence. The solution of God is transform evil into good. Because that is what Christ did. He took upon himself all the sin in the cross, crucified with sin, and then transformed the message of the cross into a message of love. That's why cross now, we don't view it as horrifying anymore. We view the cross as a message of God's love. Okay? And it has 3 steps. Evil to be conquered, the victory of the will, because it needs your will. It needs your freedom for this to happen, so that good may emerge from evil with that victory. Okay? And so, this law of the cross entails the following. Number 1, conversion. Agape or friendship. This agape or friendship is coming from Christ's treatment to us. No, I do not treat you as slave, I treat you as friends. The very reason why Christ took upon his sin, took upon the punishment of the cross, is because he is paying the debt of sin that we should be paying. And Christ will only do that because he treats us as friends. Okay? And then, the necessary criteria also is the role of the community as the leaven. Okay. What I'm trying to say here is that the law of the cross is actually grace. Conversion cannot happen without grace. Transformation from evil to good cannot happen without grace. Okay? What is this grace? It's the initiative of God. When you encounter Him, it will change you. Okay? The problem is this, no? If you have this heart of stone, a person who has this heart of stone, it's difficult to be converted, right? Okay? Grace is that when God will change your heart of stone into a heart of flesh. Okay? But that will only happen with your encounter with God. When you encounter God, that heart of stone will be replaced with that heart of flesh. And with that heart of flesh, then you will be able to recognize the agape of God. Then you will get to participate into this work of salvation of Christ. Okay? So, I'm wrapping up. Okay? That's why when we hear this phrase, no, take up your cross and follow me. Whoever wishes to be my disciples must deny himself, take up your cross and follow me. The original understanding is, what do you mean by take up your cross? Does it mean that you romanticize suffering? Does it mean that, you bear all the hardships that you are enduring? Okay? No. Okay. With this idea of the law of the cross, we get to understand that taking up your cross means participation in the act of transformation of God from evil into good. And so here, my dear friends, the law of the cross teaches not only a personal and spiritual transformation, salvation. Salvation is not only in the personal level. Why? Because a disciple of Christ who wishes to follow Him will continue His work of transforming evil into this world into good. Okay? By taking up that cross Himself. Because we who are called the followers of Christ, taking up our cross means to take part of that project of God to transform evil into good. What do you mean by transforming evil into good? We don't follow the ways of the violence. St. Paul teaches this. You cannot conquer evil by evil. You conquer evil by good. You want to conquer your enemies, you don't conquer your enemies by violence, by revenge, by vindication. You conquer them by your kindness, by your love. The very way that Christ did. Okay? It's the way of the cross because it's the way of suffering. Doing this before your enemy who is powerful, it entails that suffering. But that is our witnessing as Christians, no? To transform this evil into good in our own way. If we have this understanding, each one of us, if we have this understanding, then that structural problem, okay, of which every man is sinning, no, contributing to that consequence of sin, structure of sin, web of sin, no, this will be negated if we participate into this taking up of cross in the language of this what we call Lex Crucis, which is the transformation of evil into good. How I wish I could play. I would like to end sana with a video that would encapsulate everything what Lex Crucis is. Number one, we don't have the time. Number two, we don't have any more. We have a technical problem here. No? Kaya ba? And it's okay. It's already time. Tama ba? Dapat na 9:30 na eh. Okay. So, maybe I'll just narrate this, no? This is actually Erin Grew. If you have watched the Freedom Writers, more than the film, I would like the documentary more, because this teacher who served in a public school, where in the public school, the students in the United States, no, basically, especially in one particular section there, they are mostly gangsters, no. She made a difference to these people. Okay. What this teacher did is she immersed herself into the lives of the people. Okay, looking at the movie, she made them feel that although they have their own defects, contending their own issues, no, she made them feel that in fact all of us are the same. All of us are actually immersed into this. We are all victims of violence. Okay? She journeyed into this situation of the young people and found a way to convert these young people by transforming the heart. How I wish I could have the documentary could have expressed it so well, because at the end, okay, and this is actually true to life, it's not just a movie, it really happened, that the students of hers who are supposed to end up as criminals ended up graduating from school and changing their lives. All because of this effort of this one teacher, immersing herself into the victimhood of sin of these young people and transforming that experience into good. And this is what we call the discipleship of which Christ is also being asked us of, no? To take up our cross, to participate into the transformation of all the evil that's happening in the world into good, in our own way, in our own capacities. I think I would end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Rusty. So, we can entertain a couple of questions. Anyone from the floor? Or there's so much to chew? Ha? Wala ba? Going. Yeah.
Hello po, Father. Thank you for your wonderful talk. May question po ako, Father. Kanina, sinabi niyo there are 3 different solutions that God had for the salvation of, or the how to solve the problem. So yung una, annihilation. Pangalawa, forgiveness. Pangatlo, yung transformation. So ang question ko po, Father, what about the mini annihilations in the old gospel ng destroying the cities, the great flood? So how does that fit into the whole story of salvation? Why were those required?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially in Noah, no? But you have to understand, this is actually, I'm reading in the Christian perspective. The Old Testament has its own perspective, okay? Also, we have to understand that even the morality of the people are also growing, developing at that time. So, their reading, their understanding of God, their idea of God is that this is how God is. Okay? But if you remember, especially in Noah, he did not actually annihilate everyone. He chose the family of Noah, so that's not total annihilation. It means that God is at work, that even we thought that it's total annihilation, but no, he sees that despite the perversion of the world during that time, he sees possibilities, he sees potentiality in the world. And so with the family of Noah, the world has again repopulated again. And from Noah came out Abraham. From Abraham came out the nation of Israel. From Israel came out Judaism. From Judaism came out Christ. From Christ came out the church, already spreading throughout the world. So, if you notice here, see how God is actually acting. Okay? He sees possibilities. He does not see, problems here and there, correcting problems here and there. Okay? So, that's actually my answer. That's not total annihilation. That is still, God working even in the midst of the perversion of the world.
May question din po from the crowd, Father. Bakit po at a certain time of Holy Week, tinatakpan po yung cross?
This is not my ang tawag dito. Hindi ko na to area. This is in the area of liturgy. Okay. But this happens on Holy Thursday. I could only give conjectures. One conjecture is that maybe they want us to reflect on the very mystery of Christ, because not just the cross, but all the saints, no? So basically it's a device of the church allowing the people, because you go to, for example, Europe, you look at the churches in all magnificent, in the ceilings, in the walls, all these paintings. These paintings are not just for art's sake. They are for catechetical purpose, number one. They are also for mystical purpose, reflection, no? So when you see this, you will find yourself, reflecting or even educated with these works of art. When we look at the picture, for example, this one of Saint Francis, no? This is actually happened in the life of Saint Francis. It's one of the visions of Saint Francis. Okay, him embracing Jesus. It provokes in us that reflection. Okay? Now, the Holy Week, this is just my take, no? They cover these images so that we will get to focus on the very celebration that we are supposed to celebrate. So that's Holy Thursday. What is happening? Christ was already being, he was arrested, and then Good Friday, we are supposed to reflect on the crucifixion, and then on the death of Christ. So we look at the other things, no? We look at the glory of the angels, so that does not get synced with what we are supposed to reflect. That is just my point of view. But to answer this, better that we ask liturgists, no? I'm more of a systematic theology. Okay. Anything else?
Father, how about the resurrected image of Jesus on the cross? Parang what can you say about that po?
Not only resurrected, the Protestants, no, they are charging us, why do you still have to what do you call it? To display the crucified Christ. Christ already died. Okay? So Christ already resurrected. So why do you still have to behold the... No, but actually, we look at the cross of Christ. Number one, it reminded us of His sacrifice. It reminded us of His love. We are not crucifying Christ again as what our Protestant brothers would accuse us. The cross of Christ, when we reflect on the cross of Christ, it would remind us of that sacrifice, of that love that God has shown. That's why when we look at the cross, right now, we're not horrified, right? Because we have already a transformed understanding and meaning of the cross. But during that time, as I was telling you, that was not so. It was a scandal. It was a shock. Because right now, that is the message that we are trying to proclaim. There is that movie that I watched. It's called Dogma. It's 1990s. In the beginning part of the film, there is that bishop. They are trying to promote attendance in the Catholic Church. And they were saying, let's do away the cross, because this cross is not anymore relevant. And they show the picture of Jesus, no, doing like that, no, you know that picture of Jesus Christ, Sacred Heart, doing like that. That was very disturbing for me, because to say that we remove, it's already archaic, it's already outdated. How can we say outdated yung cross? The cross is actually the very reason why we are saved, why we are here right now, why we love. Okay? It gives us even the picture of how it is to love. Okay? So for me, that it's not that we are romanticizing pain or resurrection, but we understand the meaning of the cross as actually an image, a message of love and sacrifice. Resurrected Christ, yeah, that's the problem is not really problem. It's a picture of a victory, no? The victory of the cross. Father, why not reflect on the victory of the cross? Why we still have to go back on the suffering of the cross? Because, to truly love, the meaning of true love is to make sacrifices. That's the picture of love. Okay? The true picture of love, that is what the cross represents. Yun po, yung response ko.
Thank you, Father Rusty. So, there's so much, no? New learnings, no?